Alright, you guys, so we're gonna do a little bit of spirituality again on the channel. Um, this book was said by Rav Gadaev, really cool Rav. Um, uh, and you could look him up, by the way, online. Their channel is called Lashem. And he recommended this book, and we're gonna, with God's help, we're gonna finish with the other book too, and we're gonna try to do a couple books at the same time. So it's a new week, and we're going to, what's it called? Try to kind of cover this book and the other book, and because this is the book of Rabbi Nattan. So in common vernacular of the Hebrew, you'd say Rav Nattan, Rav Nattan was the student of the Rabbi Nachman. So he was, my friend told me, like I told you, my friend Rav Nissim, he is really cool, and he was saying a story about how they met. They met really. Well, Rabbi Nathan was older than Rabbi Nachman, but Rabbi Nachman was like super like into serving God and stuff like that. All right, so Through Fire and Water tells a story of the life of Rav Nattan of Breslov, who was one of the closest disciples of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, and who, after the Rebbe's passing, laid the foundations for the Breslov Hasidic movement as it is today. Many of the details of Rav Nattan's relationship with Rabbi Nachman, Alright, so this is by Chaim Kramer, by the way. Thanks to God, I dedicate this publication to my dear wife Reda, to Fire and Water. You have steadfastly stood by me, by my side, and to good health of my grandchildren, Rachamim Nachman ben Mazal, Tasalach Zara bat Mazal Roni Safdeh. Alright, so okay, Rab Nathan, who is the closest disciple of Rav Nachman of Breslov, and who, after the Rebbe's passing, laid the foundations for the Hasidic Breslov movement as it is today. Many of the details of Rav Nathan's relationship with Rabbi Nachman, given in early sections of this book, take on added significance in the light of developments in the later parts of Rav Nathan's life. In their take on, so many of the details of Rab Nathan's relationship with Rabbi Nachman, given in early sections of this book, take added significance in the light of the developments of the later part of Nathan's life. Alright, so glossary: Hebrew and Yiddish terms appearing in the text without an accompanying explain. Notes. Okay, so it's talking about what you will see in the book. Gems of Rabbi Nathan. Oral traditions handed down from the generation include numerous sayings of Rav Nattan and stories about him. Alright, so we're going to see this with God's help. Alright, so these are the pages. Alright, we got to borrow the book. Alright, now that we borrowed it, we're going to talk about it. Alright. He has kept our souls alive, Velo Nasan, and he has not allowed our feet to stumble. This is Velo Natan. He is not allowed. He's not gave our foot. Velo Natan. Were it not for Rab Nathan, we would have long ago stumbled. Like Velo means, and he has not allowed. And velo in Hebrew means also. If there was no Nasan, we would long ago have stumbled. God forbid. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov is universally recognized as one of the outstanding spiritual masters of all time, whose legacy of teachings stories and sayings are an inspiration to Jews and Gentiles throughout the world. Yet, even to strong devotees of Rabbi Nachman, the role of his closest student, Rabbi Nattan, often seems to have been that of an incidental character, one who has happened to be there to hear the Rebbe's teachings, and thus had a portion in the recording them for prosperity. All right. Okay. So, the role of his closest student, Rabbi Nachman, often seems to have been that of incidental character. All right, so we're going to look up what that means. Incidental. Incidental probably means like essential. Incidental, by chance, fortuitously, excuse me, using a person has more to say. Add a remark, like by way of. Alright. Yet, even to the strong devotees of Rabbi Nachman, the role of his closest student, Rav Nattan, often seems to be of incidental character. Meaning, like, one who just, just by way, like in Hebrew, we say, like, derech agav, like, something by just happens. Like, maybe you thought that Rabbi Nachman was just or Rabbi Nattan was someone who just happens to be there to hear the, like we often, like he seems to say, like, even we often seem to think like Rabbi Nathan was like just happens to be there to hear the Rebbe's teachings, and thus had a portion recording them for prosperity. Nothing could be further from the truth, though. Excuse me. This is nothing close to the truth. To anyone who examines Rabbi Nathan's life and writings, his talents as a leader, scholar, and spiritual master in his own right are readily apparent. It is just that in his deep humility, Rav Nattan dedicated his entire life and every fiber of his being to the task of transmitting Rabbi Nachman's legacy to all future generations of Jews. So, nothing could be farther from the truth. Yeah. That's why it seems like he's saying. It seems like what he's saying is like That's why it seems like we don't see so much about him. Like it's just he was so humble. Like he was just so dedicated to spreading the Rabbi Nachman's life. All right, so let's see what happens next. All right, only Rabbi Nattan could capture the fiery genius of Rabbi Nachman in words, transcribing his teachings with clarity that makes them accessible to all. It was Rabbi Nattan who printed all the Rebbe's works. He himself wrote prodigiously, examining the Rebbe's ideas and exploring their ramifications. Prodigiously examining. All right. His 8 volumes of discourses cover the entire corpus of Torah law, illuminating the spiritual dimensions of Jewish practice in a way that relates to every Jew. His flowing prayers speak for all of us, expressing our inner yearnings to draw close to God and serve Him with all our heart and soul, and might. If it was not enough for Rav Nattan that Rabbi Nachman's legacy should survive as a row of books on the shelf. After Rabbi's passing, it was Rabbi Nattan who mobilized his followers and initiated the annual Rosh Hashanah pilgrimage to the town of Uman, Rabbi Nachman's resting place. Building the Breslover synagogue there, the Rav Nattan fired a new generation of Hasidim to follow the Rebbe's path with a combination of burning passion and uncompromising honesty, turning what would otherwise have become a dead Hasidus into a new dynamic movement that is still expanding 2 centuries later. That's very interesting. It's not for throw books on the shelf. So this is actually crazy because people always say that they go to Uman, like this is where the Rebbe lives. This is where he's buried, And so he says that after he passed to the next world, right? He mobilized his followers and initiated the annual Rosh Hashanah pilgrimage to the town of Uman, which is crazy, you guys. It is so crazy. People go there, even now. Rabbi Nachman's resting place, building the Breslover synagogue there. Rabbi Nathan fired a new generation of Hasidim to follow the Rebbe's path with a combination of burning passion and uncompromising honesty, turning what would otherwise have become a dead Hasidus branch into a dynamic movement that is still expanding almost 2 centuries later. Alright, Rabbi Nachman said that many stories would have been told about all his followers. That's funny. Many stories would be told about all his followers. This is certainly true of Rabbi Nathan. 20-year-old rabbinic scholar of outstanding performance. He was as a 20-year-old rabbinic scholar of outstanding performance. He was afflicted with a most modern feeling that all his efforts were futile. To attach himself to Rabbi Nachman, Rav Nattan had to struggle against his father, his wife, his illustrious father-in-law, and even against the Rebbe himself. Dang, that's crazy. Sacrificing not merely his livelihood and security, but also the respect of practically all his peers. Dang. Rabbi Nachman passed on when Rav Nattan was only 30 years old. He was not the most senior of his followers, nor did he have the least inclination to become a leader. He had no interest in prestige. That's funny. So, 30 years old. That's interesting. He was not the most senior of his followers, nor did he have the least inclination to become leader. He had no interest in power or prestige. It was his conviction that the Rebbe's message was vital for the entire Jewish people that impelled him to feel his way forward step by step. He was convinced vital for Jewish people. Step working practically single-handed to ensure that the Rebbe's influence would survive and grow. In 1822, Rav Nattan left his native Ukraine on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. Despite the fact that the only practical way of getting there involved traveling through the Greco-Turkish war zone, he then returned home and labored to strengthen his growing following and spread Rabbi Nachman's teaching further afield. The greater his success, the more he infuriated those in the Jewish community who preferred complacency and compromise. When their ridicule, abuse, and rock throwing failed to thwart him, they tried to have him assassinated. Dang. Informed on him to the Russian government, had him imprisoned and exiled, and worked to have him sent to Siberia. Dang. Through the years of persecution, Rav Nattan held his peace, relying on faith and prayer alone for his salvation, which indeed came in the end. Unfolding the Rebbe Nathan's life makes a gripping story, but it's far more. It's a teaching about how one can turn oneself into a true chassid of Rabbi Nachman and actually follow the pathway of faith, prayer, and persistence, he taught. Rab Nachman taught that the tzaddik is like a seal. It is impossible to read the inscriptions on the seal because they are in reverse. Dang. Only when they are imprinted on wax can one make out the letters and designs on the seal. Similarly, it is possible to understand what a tzaddik is in himself because his great holiness makes him remote from most ordinary people. The only way a person can have some grasp of the tzaddik is by looking at his followers, upon whom the tzaddik has imprinted the stamp of his teachings and devotions. The Rebbe's teachings, sayings, and stories speak to each and every one of us. Yet, for all his grace and charm, the Rebbe himself remains most elusive and an enigmatic figure. The devotions he practiced are way beyond the capability of anyone in our generation, and everything he did was replete with impenetrable mysteries. Rav Nattan was just the opposite. The picture that emerges from his autobiographical writings and many surviving letters is of a man who was eminently straightforward. He followed the Rebbe's path with striking simplicity, praying and studying with all his strength, speaking to God directly, easily, singing, dancing, sharing in the joys and sorrows of his family and friends. Sharing the joys, sorrows. God forbid. Alright. Rav Nattan shows the way for all of us, for all who wish to live Rav Nachman's teachings, guiding us as to how to interpret them without sophistry, how to follow them. Sophistry. That probably means like complexity. Sophistry. Alright. Sophistry. And how to follow them without faltering. To trace the life of Rav Nattan is to understand the relevance of Rav Nachman's legacy in today's world, and what it really means to be a Breslover Chassid. The Rav Nattan's strength and courage show how a person can fulfill himself completely in this world, even in the trace of tremendous pressures and obstacles, as he adheres to the truth. So Rav Nattan's strength and courage show how a person can fulfill himself completely in this world, even if there's many, God forbid, obstacles. Rav Nachman himself said, "Were it not for Rav Nattan, not a single page of my teachings would have remained." The Breslover Hasidim added, "God has kept our souls alive and has not allowed our feet to stumble. Velo Natan lamot ragleinu." That's what it says in the book. That's what I think it says. Remember. But you guys look, if you know, write it down. The full psalm. It's right here also. Velo Nathan, for not for Rav Nattan, we wouldn't have stumbled long ago. God forbid. All right. There are no bounds to the gratitude I feel for God for giving me this privilege on working on a biography of Rav Nattan. This is, by the way, the Rav Chaim Kramer writing here. Alright, let's try to finish this real quick. There are no bounds. Alright, what can I give to God in return for all kindness that's done to me? For making a biography on Rav Nattan, what can I give God for return for all the kindness that's done for me? The combination of Rav Nattan's burning thirst to serve God and his cool self-restraint as an uncanny ability to attract anyone. Even one as distant from Rav Nattan and his ideals as myself, he once said to Rabbi Nachman, he once said to Rabbi Nachman that the world has no conception of you is not difficult to understand. But what merit have I to know of you? That, Rabbi Nachman replied, is also no question. Interesting. That is also no question. We first started considering a biography of Rav Nattan after the late Rabbi Kaplan presented us with his chronology of Rabbi Nachman's life until the Mashiach. Unfortunately, for the world at large and for us in particular, Rabbi Kaplan died suddenly a month later, in January. The loss of this dear friend, whose translation have done so much to make Rav Nachman's legacy available to the English-speaking readers, will be felt for many years to come. Although Rabbi Kaplan did not work personally on this publication, his influence on its essential conception and presentation is deeply appreciated. It was several years before Rav Nattan's biography could be put back on the drawing board again. Urgent projects kept presenting themselves as financial straits caused delay after delay. Even so, this project was never far from my heart. Each trip abroad afforded hours of quiet time during lengthy plane and train journeys that could have been used to read and reread the source material, preparing the text for translation and collation. Still, it was not until summer of 1991 that I was able to get down to the actual writing of Through Fire and Water. As Rav Nattan himself testifies again and again, life is far from easy. Just as the first draft was nearly completion, my wife took Chas v'Shalom. Needed many months to care for surgery and conceivance. She suffered in so many ways. God forbid. Throughout the years since this project was conceived, it was my prayer that in the merit of Rav Nattan will protect her. May she and our children merit to see the consolation of Klal Yisrael, described so often in Rav Nattan's writings. It takes unique a editor to turn someone else's first draft into a well written book. My deepest thanks are extended to my dear colleague Rav Avram Greenbaum, who has come to the rescue once again to help a friend in need. Rav Nattan's merit is sufficient for all. May it be with him and his family forever, in this world and next. Thanks are due to the other staff members, the Breslov Research Institute, Moshe Makov, Ozer Bergman, Alan Dimermanes, Yeshua Starret, all of whom contribute to enhance this work. Very special thanks are due to Rabbi Nachman Burstein, the veritable walking encyclopedia of Breslov history, for giving so freely of his time to clarify point after point. Rabbi David Shapiro deserves our utmost appreciation of his detailed research into many of the most obscure questions that came out to us. Our deep thanks and appreciation are also extended to Rabbi Burrow Weinstein of Monsey, New York, of his gracious permissions to quote from his monumental work, Triumph of Survival, a narrative of Jewish history from the Khmelnytsky massacres of 1648 until the present day. God forbid. Shemirachem. I will also like to extend my gratitude to my parents and family, who have long endured their share of battles over my conversation, Breslov or Hasidus. It must have been Reb Nattan's tendency that finally won them over, as they now appreciatively acknowledge the benefits found in the study and the practice of Reb Nachman's teachings from my late Rabbi and father-in-law, Rav Tzvi Aryeh Rosenfeld, who first introduced me reluctant and rebellious student. Rabbi Nachman and Rav Nattan, mere words are inadequate, nor can they suffice to express my daily Rosh Hashiva. Chaim Rosen, whose patience and wisdom brought the Breslover teachings to life. May God grant that they not suffer embarrassment because of me, God forbid. The morning of Rabbi Nathan's passing, someone read him the first two stories from Rabbi Nachman's classic Siprei Masios. At the end of the second story, the bride says to her groom, "Come, let us go home." On hearing this, Rabbi Nathan remarks, "Yes, it is my time to return home." In the merit of Rav Nattan, may God grant that all Klal Yisrael will merit to return home to the Holy Land with the coming of Messiah, the ingathering of exiles, and their building of the Holy Temple, speedily in our days. Amen. Chaim Kramer, Yerushalayim. 11th of Sivan, June 12, 1992. Alright. Through fire and water. Alright, let's how do I say? Get a little one. Part early years. Climb, but hold yourself. Alright, with God's help, we'll get to starting this up next video, with the next video for this little mini series on the biography of Rav Nattan, and also with probably more also over there about Rabbi Nachman himself. Alright guys, peace.